We take a look at one of Scotland's leading comic talents from the last century. Will Fyffe, although born in Dundee, is commonly associated with a different city after the enduring success of his song I Belong To Glasgow. A writer, singer, comedian and actor, he transcended the regional stage and Hollywood beckoned. Singer-songwriter Ricky Ross looks at the life and career of the assiduous star in He Belonged To Glasgow, the Will Fyffe story.
I've been with a few of my cronies, one or two pals of mine. We went in a hotel, we did very well, and then we came out once again. And then we went into another, that is the reason I'm fool. We had 6 Dochin Dorises, then sang a chorus, just listen, I'll sing it to you. I belong to Glasgow.
Will Fyffe was born in the city of Dundee in 1885. We heard him there record it in 1929. Not long after he was born, his father left his job to set up a touring theatre company. John Fyffe's Excelsior Theatre travelled around playing in small portable wooden theatres known as geggies. If you want to find out the roots of these geggies, you'd need to go back to Scotland's fairgrounds, as author Frank Bruce explains.
There have been fairground theatres at fairs since at least the 18th century and before. And in Scotland, there's not much record of it until the end of the 18th century, when some of the fairs really stopped being livestock fairs so much and became more entertainment orientated, particularly Glasgow Fair and Hallow Fair in Edinburgh. And with the expansion of the entertainment side of things came these little portable theatres. By the 1840s, you find several geggies actually were permanently established in Glasgow. These would have 3 or 4 performances a night, and the largest of them could sit about 1,500 people. So they were, they were good business for the showman.
It's really a high time that something was done to alter the way that the country is run. They're not doing things in the way that they should. Just take, for instance, the price of the food. 12 and a ten.
One thing that comes out quite strongly is that a lot of the fairground and circus people stayed very much in the fairground and circus. It was quite a closed community. Will Fyffe and his father were quite unusual in that they were able to break into that, because it'd be quite difficult to break into the fairground world because, it was a bit of a closed shop. But Will Fyffe is obviously the best known of those to graduate from the geggies.
Now, for people who imagine that an actor's life is still one that may require the odd gift of a Red Cross parcel and the occasional evening squatting on a friend's floor, it's worth noting that things have at least become slightly easier since these days. It was a tough showbiz apprenticeship in the geggies. The actors in those days, recalled Will Fyffe many years later, had to work harder and in the face of great competition when the fair was in full swing. The roundabouts and sideshows often used to steal our thunder. The fairgrounds' steam organs used to blare out in the middle of the most dramatic speeches. We had to shout to be heard. Often our lines were interrupted, something like this. "And tell me, darling, what do you see? Coconuts, multi-coconuts." Things didn't always go to plan, as Will's daughter Eileen describes.
When he was 7 years old and he was working in his father's travelling theatre, the first production was Uncle Tom's Cabin. My father was the smallest one in the cast and he had to be a little girl, and he hated it. He was dressed up in a beautiful white dress with a lovely golden wig flowing down his back. He was acting and he enjoyed it, until one night, as he was being questioned by Uncle Tom, "Little Eva, would you please read me from the good book?" And little Eva says, "Yes, Uncle Tom, I will. I'll just reach up and get it." From the audience, there were some boys there, and one of them shouted out, "Wally, your drawers is coming doon." And of course that shattered my dad, and he wouldn't do it anymore. He refused to do it.
At least he didn't play any more female characters. But he certainly carried on entertaining, even diverting once to a spot of boxing. The stage, however, was Will Fyffe's natural home. At the age of 20, Will married his first wife, Lily. They had 2 daughters, Josie and Winnie, and ended up performing on stage as Fyffe and Bolton. However, Lily died in a tragic shipping accident at a young age, and Will married again. With Emmeline Pooley, he was to have his daughter Eileen and his only son, Will Jr., who went on to join his father as a well-known performer. All this time, Music Hall was getting bigger and bigger. Here's Frank Bruce again.
The type of very strongly delineated character sketch that he did was very popular in the Music Hall stage, because it was a way of having a little sort of mini drama wrapped around a song with a patter in the middle. And it wasn't necessarily hugely humorous. There was a lot of sentiment involved in it, but that kind of sentimental, quite emotional type of performance, that was very, very popular. Harry Lauder, obviously, is the other name that springs to mind.
Roaming in the gloaming on the bonny banks of Clyde, roaming in the gloaming with my laddie by my side.
I think what made Will Fyffe stand out is his acting ability, which I think came from the Geggies to an extent. He connected very well with audiences. A lot of that was he had a long training before he hit the big time, really. He fell into a strong tradition, but I think he was a premier example of that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking to you now from the side of the stage at the Holborn Empire, London's real music hall. This is the first of a series of fortnightly relays from this theatre. And as it's rather a long time since we've done any broadcasting from a music hall in central London, this is something of an occasion. The first house is in full swing now. Will Fyffe's on the stage, just making his exit for his first number. You can probably hear the music. You can also hear his applause, I expect. It was, as you probably heard, that old favourite of his, I Belong To Glasgow. When he has a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to him.
When you take Glasgow alone, there was about 18 theatres in Glasgow in the days. If you take each theatre, there may have been 8 or 10, 12 acts in each theatre. And you multiply that by the amount of theatres and the amount of people who were in the music hall business. Actually, hundreds and hundreds of them.
Bob Bain, Secretary of the Scottish Music Hall and Variety Theatre Society.
Well, if you take it, the people up here in Glasgow and surrounding districts, coal miners, shipyard workers, were out working 6 days a week. And they had to do something to relieve. There was no television in the days. So the best thing was all go for a night at the music hall or variety theatre. And that kind of took away all the worries through the week and enjoyed ourselves and had a good laugh, yeah.
But for Will, these Glaswegians weren't only an audience. They became the template for his comic characters. The ship's engineer, the gamekeeper, and most memorably, and perhaps the beginning of the Glasgow stereotype, the man who has had one too many. Will was now performing and, importantly, writing his own sketches and songs.
When he first wrote I Belong To Glasgow, and he'd got another character then, 94 Today, with its song, and this was before he performed them himself. And he took them to Harry Lauder to ask him, would he like to buy them? And Harry Lauder said no, he didn't. He wouldn't do that. He decided then, because he was then in various reviews doing an act, he decided to use these characters himself, which he did, and he made a tremendous success.
It's nice to sit down when you're 94 down by the kitchen fire and think of the times you used to have and the girls that you admired. But a farmer's life's a healthy life and I feel as good as new. And I'll bet, Bob, you'll be surprised at what I'll tell to you. I'm 94 this morning, I am 94 today. I'm not so young as I used to be, I'm getting old and grey, but my heart is young.
I know that wherever we went, if we were perhaps in a restaurant, He would be writing on the back of a cigarette pack, something come to mind. I've even seen him writing on the tablecloth. And my mother saying, "You can't do that." And he was saying, yes, I've got to do it. And he'd write something down and draw something on the tablecloth. He watched people, and his characters were really made out of people he had seen, and they gave him the ideas of the characters that he wanted to make.
You know that story about the three brothers in Aberdeen? You know, that's a lie. Have you ever heard that, Ian? The three brothers, one was going abroad. He went abroad. He came back after 15 years, and he found his two other brothers with long whiskers, beards down to their knees. He says, "What's the idea of the long beards?" One of them says, "Well, you took the razor with you."
People would go back to the same theatre, neighbourhood theatre, week after week, so there was that sense, that sort of reinforced a sense of community. So somebody who's able to build on that's what made them really click well with Glasgow audiences. Even though Will Fyffe was a Dundonian, I think he still managed to click with Glaswegian audiences.
This doesn't hugely surprise me. It's my experience that there's more that draws the two cities together than pulls them apart. Despite occasionally having the odd snipe at each other, Dundee and Glasgow working people's experience is a shared history of struggle. People from both cities understand the humour from the other. In this case, the Dundonian learned to entertain the Glaswegians and became extremely popular, especially when he teamed up with Harry Gordon in a famous pantomime double act.
I know he appeared for 6 consecutive years with Harry Gordon. And Harry Gordon, once again, was much the same as Will Fyffe. He played different characters. Much the same kind of act as Will Fyffe did. His famous one was the Laird of Inversnecky, which was at this fictitious village. It had a gamekeeper, an engine driver, and a minister.
Aberdeen to Inversnecky, and Inversnecky bank to Aberdeen.
He appeared a lot. They appeared as together as Dame, and they dressed up, or in drag as we would say nowadays, and they were called the Sisters Dalrymple, not up look and not a pimple. So, yeah, they were a good partnership, I think, yeah.
They played wonderfully well together, and I used to love to watch them. I remember a kitchen scene, where Mother, Harry Gordon, was baking, and she was rolling out something and making balls of it and putting them on the table. And my dad was picking them up, and with a rolling pin, he was knocking them out into the audience. And of course there were squeals and laughs coming from the audience as these balls went shooting out over them. They loved playing together, Harry, Gordon and Dad.
Will Fyffe's breakthrough came when he was spotted by theatrical agent Tom Pacey. It would lead to his 5 appearances in the ultimate music hall show, the Royal Variety Performance, where he delighted the London audience. But if Will's act had relocated, his inspiration remained constant. I Belong To Glasgow, the song he had made famous in the theatres of Scotland, was the same song the new audience wanted to hear and hear again. If he was a long way from home, then he managed not to be misunderstood. His daughter Eileen explains how the song was inspired.
He was in a queue coming out of the station in Glasgow, and in front of him in the queue there was a man who was drunk. He'd got his family there, but he'd lost the tickets, and the ticket collector was saying, come on, you've got to have it somewhere. And in the end, because he was a nuisance, a policeman came up, and he said to this man, "Where do you come from? Do you belong to Glasgow?" He said, "I do belong to Glasgow, but Glasgow belongs to me." And my dad just thought then, that's the makings of a song.
What about the rich people themselves? It's all right for them. They've got big, fast motor cars. They can go past so quick you don't know whether they're drunk or sober. But mind you, I know because I belong to Glasgow, dear old Glasgow town. But there's something the matter with Glasgow, for it's going round and round. I'm only a common old working lad, as anyone can see.
It'd be hard to go out to the streets in Glasgow. The older generation, if you asked them, I think it was Will Fyffe, oh yes, I belong to Glasgow. Or you can come and see the baby any day you care to call. The catchy tunes at the time, but no, I Belong to Glasgow was the top one ever, do you remember?
Audiences loved the song and the affectionate portrayal of the inebriated Glaswegian. Well-known critic James Agate considered Will a genius and presumably got the essential comic point of the act when he wrote, Mr. Fyffe was not so much a sober man trying to appear drunk as a drunk man trying to appear sober. The song has been covered by an awful lot of people, some versions more successful than others.
Well, as Tommy is Scotch, I suppose I should follow suit and try and do something Scotch. So here is my impression of that ace of Scotch comedians, Will Fyffe, as he might sing, I Belong to Glasgow. I belong to Glasgow, dear old Glasgow town. But there's something the matter with Glasgow, for it's going round and round. I'm only a common old working chap, as anyone here can see. I get a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me. I belong to Glasgow, dear old Glasgow town. But there's something the matter with Glasgow, 'cause it's going around and round. I'm only a common old working chap, as anyone here can see. But when I get a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me.
In case you want to check, you heard the voices of Hughie Green, Danny Kaye, Ronnie Corbett and Lulu. Oh, and the Tottenham Hotspur 1967 FA Cup team. In the same way his old associate Harry Lauder's songs had boosted the morale of troops in the trenches, Will's song became a poignant reminder of home to our forces fighting abroad in the Second World War.
You are now looking on the ninth wonder of the world. A Scotchman doing something for nothing. But it's worth $1 million to be on this programme coming out to you boys. Now, hello, lads out yonder. Your mothers, wives and sweethearts are here with me, so you have a link with home. I'm very proud to be here today at the Alhambra Theatre, Glasgow, to send you our greetings, our love, and our thanks to you out yonder.
Will Fyffe was appointed CBE in 1942 in recognition of his war work. By this time, Will had started to appear in films. He'd even gone to Hollywood and appeared in Rulers of the Sea as the determined inventor of a steamship. He might have stayed on had war not broken out, but already he had made his own mark on cinema history by appearing in a number of films realistically depicting the working man. Professor Geoffrey Richards.
The British film industry in the 1930s was very middle class in its tone and its content, and many of its stars came from the stage. There was one exception to this, and this was those stars that were drawn from the music hall, and these became the working class heroes in 1930s Britain. Gracie Fields, George Formby, stars like that. And Will Fyffe was one of these, someone who came from the music hall stage, who had developed a rapport with their audience, had honed their act in performance, and who always played working class parts. It's very interesting that Will Fyffe, for instance, almost uniquely played working class characters, miners, dockers, farmhands, shepherds and so on. And ordinary people identified with this very strongly, whereas they didn't always identify with the middle class actors with cut glass accents.
Look at that common labourer, intoxicated, absolutely disgraceful, under the affluence of alcohol, disgraceful.
Will Fyffe became a top star in British films in the 30s, moving from quite cheap B pictures to quite expensive A pictures. And I think that his image as the stereotypical Scotsman worked, because what he was able to do, and this is very important, was to imbue a stereotype with warmth and humanity and make it believable and three-dimensional. And this image could be deployed both in comedy and drama. And so you got a very human figure who was not particularly typed to a genre, but actually carried these characteristics through convincingly in any kind of film. One of his best-loved and best-remembered films is Owd Bob, made in 1937, which is a drama of rivalry amongst Cumberland sheep farmers.
Man, I hardly ken what to say to you, Will. You were the one great dog in the world that I would have bet my life on. And now... But you couldn't help it, Will. I ken that. You could no more help killing that sheep than I could help turning my own lassie out of the house. You could no more help killing that sheep than I could help taking that last drink that lost you the cup.
And he basically plays his familiar character, cantankerous, determined Scottish shepherd, defending his homestead against attack, defending his dog, Black Wull, when he's accused of sheep worrying, but at the same time gambling and boozing the rent money away. So you've got a combination of kind of sternness and determination with fecklessness, which was what often featured in his roles, which made him lovable. His talent is particularly apparent in a wonderful scene when he delivers a soliloquy to his dog, knowing he's got to go out and shoot the dog, and he speaks about his feelings for the dog, and that's very much a kind of thing that's done with sincerity and pathos and really moved the audience.
We'll just hear we walk down the glen. Well, just you and me together, where not a soul can see us.
It's interesting that in the same year of 1937, he could make two very different films, a fast-moving comedy, Said O'Reilly to McNab, and Owd Bob, which is a drama. In Said O'Reilly to McNab, he's teamed with the Irish-American comedy dancer Will Mahoney, and really it's a succession of routines in which they pit their wits against each other and try to swindle each other, the blarneying Irishman and the canny Scotsman.
Malky, I'll do it. Send me, my boy, you'll never regret it. Yes, and we'll call it O'Reilly and McNab. No. Yes, limited. No. McNab and O'Reilly. Sounds better.
Will's final film scenes never came out. It was 1947, and he was cast in Bonnie Prince Charlie, a film with an already doomed history. Suffering from an ear problem which came from a diving accident as a boy, Will retreated to the hotel he now owned in St Andrews on the east coast of Scotland for some recuperation after an operation.
He came up to the hotel with my mother, and they were in his suite whilst he was recovering. But his treatment wasn't helping him at all, and he'd lost his balance with this operation. He was falling about. It was very, very worrying because he was due to go back to Hollywood to make another film. It happened one day that my husband came in to me and he said, "Your father's fallen from his room and the ambulance has come to take him." And we went off in the car with my husband to the hospital, and my mother and I stayed with my dad all during that day. And that night, very sadly, he died.
When Will Fyffe was laid to rest, thousands attended the funeral. He was buried fittingly in the Western Necropolis in Glasgow, the city with which he was most associated. If Will Fyffe is not as well remembered as his contemporary and friend Harry Lauder, he was never made a Sir, it's not because he was not a big star. Even at the time of his death, he was negotiating a return passage to Hollywood and was still one of the 3 top box office draws in the country. His work in film, stage and song lives on even now in popular memory. However, Will Fyffe was a quiet star, fond of fishing and golf. He was happy to be accepted by the people of his adopted hometown and remains in an elite club of Scottish entertainers who are known by an international audience.
A lot of Scottish comedians could be very popular in Scotland, but they just couldn't make the leap to a wider audience. Their frame of reference was too narrow. So what made performers like Will Fyffe and Harry Lauder stand out was they got rid of a lot of the kind of local rough edges of it, and that then enabled them to reach a wider audience.
My father has the finest nose in the McGregor family. A credit to Scotland. You know this? People come for miles to see my father's nose. Of course, that's in the daytime. At night time, they can see it from where they are.
I think that he has to be considered in two regards. First of all, as somebody who kept the image of Scotland and Scottishness on the screen in the 1930s and 1940s and gave it a star role, because most Scottish performers were character actors or only in supporting roles, and he was an undoubted star. But also, it is because he consistently played ordinary, down-to-earth, working-class people at a time when heroes were generally upper-class and genteel, and he carved out for himself a unique niche in this regard.
I don't think many people realise that he was actually born in Dundee. He was a Dundonian. I think the majority of people think he was a Glaswegian. I think he was definitely should have been made an honorary Glaswegian anyway, because I think he saw himself as a Glaswegian when you look at his career.
He was kind. He loved being at home with the family. My father, I just loved him very much. And when I look back about and think about him, I remember what a kind man he was. He was good. He was a good man. We all loved him. He was very well loved everywhere.
And if people don't know Will, then they know his songs. The last time I played a live show was in Hogmanay with my band Deacon Blue. It was under the festive lights in George Square, right in the heart of Glasgow. The audience were 15,000 quite young Glaswegians, and despite them being half my age, they seemed to love the very old song we chose to open the show. I'm not surprised. If we songwriters could write one that lasted as long in popular memory as this, we'd all be very happy.
I belong to Glasgow, dear old Glasgow too. There's something the matter with Glasgow, for it's going round and round.
I'm only a common old one in life, as anyone here can see. But when I hit the trouble and drink on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me.
He Belonged to Glasgow. The Will Fyffe story was produced in Manchester by Elizabeth Foster.